Welcome to another edition of Soil and Roots, where we examine the intellectual foundations that led to the optimal human values framework. And today I'd like to talk about Ken Wilber. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to Ken Wilber in my teens by my Episcopalian priest. Thanks, Father Johnson. And so it's been over 20 years since I first read A Sociable God and No Boundary and Eye to Eye, my first Ken Wilber books. And I have studied his work as it's come out avidly over the years. I consider Ken to be one of my top 5 influences and mentors in my intellectual life. And I just can't thank him enough for the gift that he's been to me and for the gift that he is to the world. If you're not familiar with Ken Wilber and you care about creating a conversation that can bring people together, his work is absolutely mandatory. He has essentially created a framework that all of the serious conversations about wholesomeness and values are going to be happening over the course of the next century. For an introduction to his work, I highly recommend the Sounds True audiobook called Cosmic Consciousness, or his popular book called The Marriage of Sense and Soul, both of which give you a good idea of what it is he's about. The optimal human values framework can be considered a complement to his integral system. It's designed to address an area that he hasn't addressed in much detail. Specifically, what would an optimal set of human values be that would move you along the spectrum in the various developmental lines that he talks about? If you're familiar with his work, he does an exquisite job of creating a set of categories and categorizations that allow you to study various ideas and put them into appropriate cubbyholes so that you can contrast them with one another, differentiate them, arrange them into hierarchies, into developmental lines, etc., in a way that's truly beautiful and wonderful. However, Ken Wilber doesn't deal a lot with moral values. His system is excellent at categorizing a particular value according to its level or according to its developmental line, but he does not say much about how you use values to move up the developmental lines. We could say that he's got a couple basic ideas on this. One he describes as the basic moral imperative, which is the greatest depth for the greatest span, which is a type of spiritual utilitarianism, I suppose. Unfortunately, it has the same challenges that all utilitarian arguments have, namely that it talks about a relative perspective between things, but it doesn't set an absolute value, and so it's very difficult. How much depth would you use for how much span? Since those pieces aren't defined, the actual principle becomes very difficult to apply. Another way he might talk about it is that you develop through transcending and including. But the question, again, is unanswered. What do you transcend and what do you include? So the optimal human values framework is designed to complement and fit within the integral system in such a way that instead of looking at how you categorize values, it's how you look at wherever you are at any part of the developmental line. How do you move to the next level in that developmental line? And optimal human values suggests a series of criteria that you use that when you use them and when you integrate them allow you to move forward on those lines. So that's a big picture of how optimal human values and Ken Wilber's integral system fit together, and we'll be learning much more about this as we move forward.